So, no, Devarim Hayetzim, they say the expression, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I think that's a major one. Beloshen Chazal, Dvarim Hayetzim Alev, Nichnasim Alev. Words that come from the heart enter the heart. Tell me, how would you rate it? If you heard the most brilliant teacher or brilliant speaker speak, you don't think he cares. It's not from his heart. And then another one, he's not so brilliant. It's not so powerful arguments, but he cares. And the words are from the heart. Who's gonna capture your attention? Obviously, it would be good to have both, but I really think that's a major thing. You talk about the Rebbe. To me, again, I'm a natural skeptic. When I looked at the Rebbe, I knew he was like a king in the hill, and I grew up with him. But to me, ultimately, it came down to, I watched him, and I saw the examples. I saw the care. Care was major. He cared. Everything I said ultimately goes with caring. The fact that why would someone dedicate their life to try to get other people to recognize their mission? What does he have from it? What does he gain from it? It's only someone that cares. Someone called, we all were teenagers once, right? I don't know if any of you were blessed to have a real mentor. No, I mean a real mentor. I don't mean a figurehead. A mentor, someone that said something to you when you were 17 years old that could change your life. And how many kids don't have someone like that today? These are people who care, huh? Yeah. Good point. You're right. Very good point. No, but someone that says something, that age where you're struggling and your questions and you're naive at some point, but you're still becoming an adult. People who care and say something wise, are very rare. And I think that's a major, major factor. So I don't know, a better way to reach people is by caring about them. And I don't mean feigned care. I'm talking about real, you really care. You care about a person, you don't care. You'll know right away if someone cares. I speak sometimes, I give like a training for speakers or teachers and so on. So I remember speaking to a group of rabbis, and I said, they wanted to know, like a course on how do you communicate well, effective communication. So I asked them all, I said, so let's say in your kehillah, in your community, or in your lecture, your drasha, your vartet, or whatever, you have 30 people coming. And there's a group of 20 new people. You've never seen them before. You may never see them again. What is your objective in sitting in front of you? What do you want to achieve? It was very interesting, everyone's responses. One said, I want to blow them away with a great idea, so they'll this. The other one said, everybody wants them to return. But what is the key thing to get to them? And everyone said interesting things, but I think the crux they didn't say, and then I shared. I said, you want one thing, and one thing only. You want them to trust you. You want trust. There's no trust. It doesn't matter what you say. And you can't buy trust. You have to earn it. Trust means that they relate to you. They see you're a person that cares. You're a person that they feel is honest. There's integrity, sincerity. Nobody wants to hear from a rabbi or teacher who's not sincere, or you feel has an agenda or an axe to grind or something. Why do I have to come and sit and listen to you? If you're going to a real estate course or a course on how to invest, you don't really care how arrogant the teacher. At least you're getting your information. But you're not talking about spirituality and God and Hashem and this. You want someone that is shtickle mensch. A guy that just thinks he's very smart. And trust is a big one, because when there's trust, there's the benefit of the doubt. I don't know if you can, train people how to engender trust, but you have to just be a person who's sincere, or else why are you doing this? Why would you get up and speak? I told them, if you don't feel that you have something that you have something to contribute. And it's not about pontificating and saying, hey, I'm going to bestow my compassion on everybody and tell them how smart I am. I'm going to give you my time because I'm a brilliant guy. That does not fly, especially for intelligent people. These are things I think you can't fake it. We all went to yeshiva, we went to systems. We know, when a guy you feel is serious and sincere, and when they're not. These are some of the. I'm not saying anything I think very brilliant. I'm just picking, I think, common sense stuff. Unfortunately, sometimes it's not. This makes people hear this more in the secular world than in our own Yiddish world. In the Yiddish world, it's like much more focus on scholarship and knowledge and brilliance. than on caring. And I think that, especially for our kids, far more important that someone care than someone be brilliant. I mean, you want both. You want someone that knows how to learn, obviously, a Torah person, but care is a major factor. Because you care, then you're going to apply yourself. You're sensitive. You won't have a cookie cutter model for everybody and just give them a canned response. Here's the automatic response. You look at somebody, every person has their particular needs. No two people are alike. It was the worst thing. I remember when I was in yeshiva, when people fit us into one big group and everybody the same solution. We're different people. Not that we had the words for it, but now, I think back. I'm telling the same thing to three people. They're all completely different needs. And I'm not going to blame it either. The systems that we have are really set. I don't have the resources for everybody. So basically, the top of the class and the low part and the low fall aside. It's mostly for the average. The ones that fit in the mold. They don't have really. I'm not here to criticize the whole system. I understand some of the reasons for it, but I think that's part of it. So let me say the fifth thing, which is, I just share a little story that's just an interesting experience. I was mentioning before the class I give every week. So I learned something about the art of communication is part of understanding who you're speaking to. I'm speaking to you, you're you, you're you, you're you. I don't know, everyone's different. And obviously, speak to a group. You have to figure out how to speak in a way that resonates. But people are different, and people have different needs, and many people stereotype. So I deal a lot with the secular world. People who are do not follow Torah mitzvahs as we know them. Some are great people. Some are people Taneka Shenishbu, don't know better. So I'm not judging. I'm just stating as a so-called description. And it has its own challenges. In some ways, I could tell you it's easier than speaking to so-called frum Jews, because they don't have preconceived notions. Frum Jews have already God figured out. They have they got it all, it's all set up. And here, people will say, I don't really know, they'll just say, I don't know. They don't think they know. Doesn't mean there aren't other challenges. The challenges there is a lot of stereotypes. Recognizing stereotypes is a big thing. You walk into a room, so I don't know, in a room like this, perhaps not. It's a friendly audience. But I've been in rooms where, you see a guy with a beard, a yarmulke, a hat, whatever. They stereotype you, the Woody Allen stereotypes of Jews. And stereotypes are invisible. No one tells you their stereotype. It's in their minds. So I remember when I started teaching in my class I was referring to before, the people who were coming from the arts and entertainment industry. They were Jews, mostly Jews, and they were all spiritual, very seekers, but not in a traditional way. Some went to yeshiva, but mostly, dropped out early. And they would say they found their spirituality in things like Zen Buddhism or other things I don't want to mention in this room here. Let's say it's not an acronym for let's start davening. Okay? And stuff like that. Can you figure that out? Good. So I tried an experiment. I've shared this story many times because it was so poignant. I tried an experiment. I realized that, I don't know what kind of image they're projecting on me. I may remind them of an angry grandfather that schlepped to shul when they and punished them when they misbehaved, or irrelevant Hebrew school teacher. Everyone's got their life experience. So I tried an experiment. I didn't use any reference to anything Torah or Jewish. Created my own. Instead of God, I used the word, we call it etzem, the essence, the reality. If it was a particularly new age group, I would say things like undefined layers of unconscious energy or something like that. Instead of Torah, I used the word blueprint. Instead of mitzvahs, connections. Instead of Mashiach, I used destination. So here I was waxing eloquent about this journey into the essence of reality through connections, following a blueprint until we reach a destination where there'll be a seamless union between matter and spirit, and the unconscious and the conscious. So I remember it was really quite humorous. People they were mesmerized. Actually, they were saying this is great stuff. And after a few weeks, a guy comes over to me. I remember who it was. He was a singer in the group in the 60s. There was a group called Jay and the Americans. His name is Kenny. He says to me, tell me, are you talking about God? Because I'd never mentioned it. So I said, yeah, but shh, don't spoil it for the others. And I said nothing. I didn't compromise anything in the theme and the ideas. I just simply changed words. As simple as that. And I realized how successful it was based on one thing. Words, especially in our day, we think words. They tell you in therapy, break the silence. No one knows what you're thinking. Communicate. Express yourself. The fact is, words actually can create bridges, but they also create gaps, schisms. Because my words can be innocent to me, and you can go ballistic because your mother used it every time she got angry or something. So words are loaded. And words like God, Torah, mitzvahs, frankly, mean really nothing, honestly. What does it mean? It means what you grew up with that you think it means. For someone else, it may mean completely something else. Lev Yitzchak Berditchever once told a self-professed atheist, the God you don't believe in, I also don't believe in. Define God. What do you mean? Don't tell me that you believe it, don't believe. Tell me what kind of... You're talking about a man with a white long beard sitting on a throne in heaven that strikes us with lightning when we misbehave? Many very faithful people would say that's not a God. I'm an atheist if that's God. So especially these words, they're so loaded, and they have to be defined. Look, the first thing you see in any legal contract, terms, definition of terms. Who's who? Because if you don't agree on the terms, the whole contract is meaningless. Because you think that term meant that, and this one thought that. You need to define your terms. And even the word Torah. What is Torah? Bible, book of laws, history, Torah Lashon Hara, direction, blueprint. So it was really interesting, and I find it consistently this way. Here, take the big elephant in the room topic called Mashiach. So Mashiach is, full of controversy, and everyone knows. I saved the best for last. What do you mean? Full of controversy. I would even call it sensationalism, and so on. You can't have in most environments a decent conversation because the stereotypes are just too deep. I can tell you that right now. In the very secular world you could, because the whole thing meaning. One guy said to me, I know it comes to my class, he says, what's this whole thing with the Mashiach argument? I got problems with that. I understand people, they wrap animal hide on their hands every day. They twirl these species over their heads in sukkahs. Some of them twirl chickens and then they kill them. He says, that to me more crazier than any Mashiach idea. For him the whole Yiddishkeit is insanity. I'm just saying, So he says, because we take it for granted. Some people say, imagine coming to a shul the first time and you see a sukkahs. What is this thing? They have a palm branch and a lemon and this, and they're shaking it, they're turning it. We take it with us, it's common, but someone who never seen it thinks, this is some form of, sorcery or what? I'm not trying to be cynical. So it's very difficult to talk about it because it's fraught with so much stuff, and the identity, the Rebbe Mashiach, not Mashiach, is he alive and not alive, I know I was not brought here to talk about this, but I'm also known to not necessarily follow rules. But no. I'm about to do that. That's exactly why I made this introduction, because it was the fifth topic. I would go back to a basic principle, and forget about now Chabad, Lubavitch. Let's cut that out. Let's go into Shemoneh Esrei. Shemoneh Esrei it goes back Anshe Knesset Agdela. You have 6 or 7 out of the 18 brachas touches something geula. Samach David Avdecha v'sachzenu einenu tchiyas hamesim. Right? I would say this precedes Chabad, right? All these brachas. So the question is a simple one. How do we understand Mashiach, Emunah Mashiach? Pure, what's the meaning of believing Mashiach is going to come? Again, take away all controversy. How would you explain this to somebody who's just a newcomer? It's not hostile, neutral. So I explain this very often, very simply, and again, just step back a moment. Look, if God is the designer of existence, he's the cosmic architect, he built it all. He built it for a purpose that we believe. Purpose means the purpose will be realized. Whatever that purpose, there will be a destination. There will be an end to the story. Mashiach is simply the realization of that purpose. So to say, for example, the Rambam equates, Yud Gimel Ikrim, he equates belief in God, belief in Torah, and belief in Mashiach all in the same boat. That's the Ikrim. The question some ask is why? What happens if you believe in a God, you believe in the Torah, but you don't believe in Mashiach? Chaz v'shalom, let's say. What's missing? Why is it an Ikr? For example, a person believes in all that, doesn't accept Shabbos, no one calls it an Ikr. It's missing something, and Kefir even one letter in Torah, but you can't call it a foundation the same way. The answer is very simple, because if God, the designer, built the world with a purpose, and the purpose will not be realized, then the purpose is meaningless. It's like saying there's a captain of a ship, he's taking it somewhere, but he's never going to get there. So you're basically challenging the whole premise of existence, really, and purpose of existence. So Mashiach simply, in simple English, is realization of a purpose. Let's go back to the mission statement. I started with mission. A business has a mission. The mission has to be accomplished. Obviously, accomplished, there's many levels in it. But if Google was not accomplishing their mission they would not be where they are today. And they measure that every day, and they have competition, and everyone wants to displace them. So, fine. No, but I'll get to that in a moment. Let me just say. So the concept that there will be a realization of Hashem's plan, so to speak, that there will be v'shachanti b'seicham, and so on and so forth, and Golus is not the state, Golus is an aberration, and the healthy natural state is the Shechina Lamata. That essentially is Mashiach. That's what it means. Mashiach. I'm not talking about the identity of who's the leader, who's leading them in. I'm talking about like Yitzias Mitzrayim. What's Yitzias Mitzrayim? They left Egypt. Moshe was the leader Hashem chose. But there's more than just a leader here. There's a process that's going somewhere. And where are they going? To Eretz Yisrael, Promised Land. There's a tachlis. Bottom line in Mashiach means there's a tachlis to this creation. So, obviously, I'm talking to Torah Shabbat and Torah Shabbat combined. I'm not going to go into the whole the Rambam, that speaks about Mashiach and all the allusions to it in Chumash and then Tanakh. I'm just talking the overall picture of it. So I've said this to many audiences that are very not even, I wouldn't call people of faith. Everyone totally makes sense. They may have a question whether they believe there's a God with a design, but if there is one, it's a natural to say that will be fulfilled. If there isn't one, that's another debate. But then the debate is about God and purpose and is the world an accident and that, which is a whole other discussion. That's number one. If you get to that core explanation, almost everything else is moot, really. So then the question is, the Gemara says that there was an opinion that maybe Mashiach, Hashem, it won't be a physical Mashiach. Hashem will just, and they say that better that person wasn't born. The Gemara in Sanhedrin. And nevertheless, the Gemara brings it even. The Gemara brings such an opinion and then completely dismisses it. It says that a person should never have been born who said that opinion. Because the Gemara, I guess, wants to bring out that there is such a concept. Look, Hashem could have taken Eden out of Mitzrayim without Moshe. You need Moshe Rabbeinu. Can't figure out a miraculous way to take them on eagle's wings. But he wanted a human being. There are explanations why. So it's not inconceivable that that's how he wants the Gula to come. He wants a human being like one of us that will lead the way. I'm saying if you start with that type of basic principle. So when I say destination, very simple. I was asked the question years ago, and it always bothered me. I was asked by a young person, actually, a young teenager. He said to me, he was a smart guy, and he was rebelling. He didn't want to go to yeshiva anymore. He said to me, you answer me one question, and I will reconsider my, he wanted to leave everything, but he was a very smart guy. He was young. But he says to me, what difference does it make if I do a mitzvah or I don't do a mitzvah? We're all going to die at the end. We're all going to be eaten by the same worms, whether we're tzaddikim or rishayim. What difference does it make? To whom? So I said, so what answers have you heard? He said, well, I've heard that's what Hashem wants. That's one answer. Another one is because it's the right thing to do. You don't have to think about what difference. The bottom line is you do something good, you did the right thing. You do something wrong, you did a bad thing. So I said, why is these are not satisfying? He says, because they're all, it doesn't really satisfy me philosophically. So I was thinking about it. So I said, let me give it some thought. I wanted to also, get him exactly. So I came back to him. met the next day. I remember I said to him, I'll tell you why. Because it doesn't die. Your body may be buried, but what you released through doing a good thing lives on forever. And I said, that's what made, that's why it was worth the Mesiras Nefesh of our parents and our grandparents. Why did Avraham Avinu's Mesiras Nefesh died with him? God forbid. It changed the world. It changed history. The fact that he wasn't physically there, so his children were there. And I remember hearing once from Eli Wiesel, he told me once, I asked him if it's true that they used to sing Ani Maimin when they went. So he said he was never in that part of the camp because he was in a different area near the gas chambers. But he said, but he heard many times Shema and Kaddish and singing in his area too. So I said, let me ask you, how is it the Jews are standing? I mean, there's no bigger Hester Punim than the Holocaust. God is, when we say in Yizkor we say we don't want the Goyim to say Ayeh Lekechem. I mean, that was the Holocaust. Ayeh Lekechem, right? It was God, and they still had the presence to say thank you to God, Kaddish and Shema. So I remember he said something just, nonchalantly. It was just it captured, I think, a critical point. The point is that the Jews always said the following: you can take our bodies, but you can't take our souls. And if it's not going to be us, it's going to be our children. If it won't be our children, it'll be our grandchildren. That never dies. Because they knew, they knew the end is Mashiach. There's a woman that just lost her husband tragically to cancer, a very young man. And she sends me an email, and at the end of her email, she writes, I guess it's her genetic signature, and I was just so taken by it. She writes, I know what happened to her, so it wasn't just a nice slogan. She writes, at the end, everything will be good. If it's not good, it means it's not the end. And I remember I called her, I said, that's very touching what you wrote, after what you've gone through. Mashiach to me is that. It means that there's an end. I don't mean end and there won't be a continued hemshech. Obviously there's life after, but I mean that our lives are worth it because it will be realized. And when our grandparents paid a price, it didn't die with them. It lives on in one way or another, and it will be realized. That's why it's such a ikr. Take away that, then someone will say, you know what? Okay, I'll do it out of Kabbalah. God wants me to do mitzvahs no matter what. But it makes it so much richer to know there is a destination. This thing is going to somewhere. And the story will end in a good way. And I think from a point of view, even on a psychological point of view, you know that you're fighting a battle that has a conclusion. What was the problem with Vietnam? One of the biggest things. The war was endless. It was like going, no one even knew what they were fighting for. No one even knew what meant victory. How could you fight a war that you don't think you can win? So the idea psychologically is to know that we can win this battle and that we will prevail, and that emunah permeated in people from the beginning of time is a vital component. Anyway, let me tell you the end of the story with this boy. I told him this. He came back to me. He's a great guy, and he's a rabbi somewhere. Leads a big community. We still have connection. He tells me. He says to me, that was like pivotal moment. He said, you said the right thing at the right time. And I said it from my heart. I wasn't trying to be cute with him. I wasn't trying to give him some new answer. I was just trying to convey to him that things don't die. It's not that way. A good deed, we believe, lives on forever. It doesn't die. Just because physical things die, spiritual things don't die. Right. That idea. Exactly. So, to me, this is... So go back to this fifth principle. The Rebbe Geula was no question in his mind all the time. Mashiach and so on. And made it a very big objective to bring the Geula in our time. And anyone that reads and understood the Rebbe was not controversial at all, frankly. There's nothing there that wasn't said before. He just talked about it openly. It's the things that were always written. And I think a lot of Jews are uncomfortable with it because no one ever speaks about it in any normal way. It's either like this mysterious thing, and I think it's been Christianized a lot. I think even Jews react to the Christian version of it instead of the Jewish version. If you read the Rambam, It's the most idealistic type of life. It doesn't say, but it says you don't even need miracles. It's basically a change of consciousness, is what he says. Rambam says, Lo yiyesek el l'dasis Hashem bolvad. So which human being doesn't dream of a world that will be without death and famine and hunger, and a world that's connected to God instead of selfishness? That's what it comes down to. And for some reason, I don't know, I guess it turned sensational because the focus is on, I think, there's an ikr, there's a tofel. That's how I understand it. I mean, so for me, it's a positive thing that you can infuse people with hope, and you can infuse people that what you do today is building a better tomorrow. And that all the Torah mitzvahs that we do are building blocks for a world where the Shekhinah will be here, where godliness will dwell on this earth as it did once in Gan Eden. So, I mean, it's not, when you say it like that, tell me which Eid that learned Torah has a problem with that, you know? So, I mean, I understand. I'm not being naive. I understand where the controversies come from. It's not about what I'm saying right now. It's about some of the factors. Who's Mashiach, and this one and that one, and all that stuff. I also think that because Mashiach is not spoken about a lot, people are uncomfortable. Like many people say, they'll say, mainstream Judaism, we don't talk about Mashiach. It will come when it will come. And you have unique skills that nobody but you has. And the question is, are you living up to your mission? The question is, do you even think about what your shlichus or mission is? This is one of the central themes of all the talks of the Rebbe. And it can be translated, as I just said, it's not a Rebbe's chiddush, it's a Torah chiddush. But a Gadol Yisrael knows how to take an element in Torah and apply it to our times. Why this is a message that's critical to teach our children. Because if you think you're significant and indispensable, your whole life is different. Then you take your life seriously. There's a sense of urgency. And as I mentioned before, in our times, it's very easy to be very lax. We're not running from enemies. So it's very easy to become comfortable. You know, they say that, the joke, the guy said, what's worse to his friend, apathy or ignorance? So he said, I don't know, and I don't care. You know? When things are going well, it becomes very easy to be apathetic. Because there's no enemy to fight. Now, God forbid, I'm not advocating any wars, but when there's a war, are you going to fight for your principles? What principles do we have today? So as from Eden, we were taught there were principles. But it becomes very easy, when it starts becoming easy to do it, we take for granted these blessings. So that type of sense of urgency, waking up in the morning, it says in the Shulchan Aruch, to jump out of bed, Gibber Kari, Rotz Ketzvi. I mean, we all know these words, but how many people actually wake up and are excited to jump out of bed? Most people say, oh, hey, what's coming today? They press the snooze button, you know? Because life is sometimes overwhelming. That attitude comes if you know that you have a calling, and knowing it can't be done without you. It changes your whole life. It changes your whole life, and this is something the Rebbe emphasized many, many times. I can tell you hundreds of times, and it was like an underlying principle. And I could tell you from my own experience, and I share this with people who have no clue even what Torah Yiddishkeit is. They think about it. They say, really? That's unbelievable. I'm indispensable. And that's the first statement in the Torah. Then your mitzvahs and your actions and your choices are also indispensable, are also critical. It's not optional. So that's the first thing, to understand that we're on a mission. Of course, everyone asks the next obvious question is, so how do I find out what my mission is? You know, doing Torah mitzvahs, that's everybody's mission. How do I find my unique? So I'll just share with you a short little exercise that you can try in your own privacy. An exercise. It's really actually. So it would be very nice when we came out of our mother's womb, when we were born, with a little box that said, your mission is so and so. That would be great. But that didn't happen. We're given a Torah, but it's not easy. And many of us can spend half our lives and still not know exactly what my real role is. And then life takes over, as they say, while you're busy making other plans. You know, life is, right? And then you're busy with Taigas HaParnasa and all kinds of things, so you get distracted. But there's something that God does work in our lives, and even though we may not always know it, a thing called Ashgacha Pratis. God leads, Shem Mitzadi Gover Kananu. Shem leads the footsteps of a person. We have the choice, Bechira, free will, is how we're going to use those footsteps. And you come here or there. But your footstep, where you were born, to whom you were born, what country, where you live, these are not your choices. Like, why did your neshama end up in your parents' home and someone else's neshama another? Completely divine plan. So to use, I guess, a modern little cute acronym, think of it the POP, P-O-P-P. To find your mission, you have to identify four things. Your unique personality, your opportunities, P-O-P-P, the people you know, and the places you've been to. What does this mean? You'll find every one of us has different coordinates, so to speak. Your personality, look, some people are very cerebral, others are emotional. Some are very detail-oriented, others are more vision-oriented. Some are artistic, some are practical. I mean, we have all kinds of different personalities. And your personality, again, we're talking about your inherent natural personality is not your choice. Why were you given this personality? Because that means that your shlichus, your mission is that personality is necessary for your particular mission. Hashem is not going to give a spirit of a musician to someone that's not his mission or her mission. Personality. I'm just being general here. Personality obviously has many categories and subcategories. Then opportunities. Every one of us have unique opportunities. I have opportunities that come my way. Why these opportunities come my way? That was what was sent to me. The people you know. And the places you've been to, where you were born, where you traveled, where you travel now. These are not incidental things. These are all signposts. Basically like clues. That if you look at them, and you identify them, you could begin to start saying, okay, I can begin to map out a little of my life. So we're not here to go through a whole, there's not a workshop on finding your mission statement. It deserves that too. I just wanted to make this point. Because even thinking about it, I think can change something. You wake up tomorrow morning, and you say, Moida Ani, and you thank Hashem, turning my neshama to me. What does that mean? It obviously means that He gave me another day of life. Thank God, health. But it also means, thank God, Hashem, that you've given me another day to fulfill my calling. What am I going to do today to fulfill it? Just ask that question, and you're already in a better place. And to say, just go work, I'll go through the road that I wrote, mechanical. Yeah, that's what most of us do. We just do whatever our demands are. But a Yid is supposed to be someone who makes things happen, not just reacts. Not just an observant Jew observing what's happening, but making things happen. In the world, my father was a journalist, so in the journalists, they say there are three types of people. People who make things happen, people who watch things happen, and people who ask, what happened? So asking yourself that question. We make things happen. And that means taking the bull by the horns, so to speak, controlling your destiny, understanding what's my calling. Imagine if every night before our children go to sleep, they wake up in the morning, say, Moida Ani, before they go to sleep, Yot Chav Kedruchi. We would say to them, besides that, I love you. Always remember, Hashem sent you here. You have something unique to contribute in this world. And we'll find it. Imagine what if we grew up knowing that, like ingrained in our hearts and souls. How many problems it would preempt. And I was talking to a group of what they call teens at risk recently. Unfortunately, Jewish boys and girls got in trouble with drugs and alcohol. But thank God they're on the rebound. So we can have open conversation. I asked them all, tell me, what do you think? How'd you get into, nobody wants to get into trouble. Nobody wants to become an addict, God forbid. It doesn't start I want to become an addict. But what was the beginning? What caused you? So one said bad friends. This one said my parents went through an ugly divorce. Everyone had the usual suspects. I wanted to get deeper with them, so I said to them, do you think it has anything to do with boredom? Everything begins in a vacuum. They say nature abhors a vacuum. So does the human spirit. A vacuum means when you're bored. Nothing to do. So what happens when you're bored? Like it says in Rashi, when it's empty pit, things what happens in the Choshen V'Akrabim will get in there. Psychologically, that's one of the biggest rules. All problems don't begin in the middle of nowhere. There's always a vacuum. Infections don't fester unless there's space for them. And the vacuum begins with boredom. And you should know, all the kids, they all said, absolutely. I would never have identified that, because boredom doesn't seem like a big, so I'm bored, so what? We're all bored from time to time. But boredom is an environment, a breeding ground for infections. And the counter element, the counter force to boredom is a sense of urgency. Someone knows, project, I'm involved. And I suggested to them, I said, all of you should get involved with projects that feed your talents. And thank God some of them, one's a musical person, one's helping out with doing filming, this one's on a computer, this one's a good writer. You feed children with their talents and show them how they can use their talent toward a tachlis. Obviously, a tachlis of pitera, it's a whole different world than just tell somebody, don't be bored. it's filling the soul with what it needs most, and a sense of mission, a sense of urgency. So l'chaim, to each one of our missions here, it's an honor to be sitting with indispensable neshamas that God chose to put on this earth. Each of you has to play your unique music and song, and hopefully all of us together can create the right symphony. In a good symphony, every player is necessary, is indispensable, but also we all need each other. Every musical note knows I can't play my music if I don't have other musical notes. But if you don't do your note, the rest of us are also compromised. So, l'chaim to my dear fellow kindred spirits, l'chaim. No, you know, you know. Huh? How deep? You said that my job is to make deep things simple.
Yeah.
Maybe it's deceptively simple. How deep? Lifnei atzimtzum? Huh?
Without flesh.
Sorry about your grandfather. Your father's here? He's back? I didn't know that, but I would have come to this. Oh, I thought they were a state of business. How's he doing, your father? L'chaim. The second point, second contribution. You're moving away from me? Oh. I thought I said something offensive. A second contribution, which is also a fundamental principle. They say that story about this professor who wrote a paper, and this was his life work, presented it to the wizards of the world to get their comments, and they came back. Unanimously, they said, your paper is both good and original. He was very impressed. His colleagues, his peers, gave him that type of endorsement. And then they said, but there's one problem. The part that's good is not original, and the part that's original is not good. Which means that sometimes the deepest and the most important things in life are not about some original chiddush. We say, Kol ma shetalmid v'asek aseh l'chadish nitin l'Moshe Messina. We all know it's like a contradiction, seemingly, of terms. So everything a student is mechadish. A chidush means it's innovation. And then it says, Nitn l'Moshe Messina. It says, innovation or not given to Moshe. The answer is also very obvious. Wisdom, knowledge, is accumulative. There's klolim, there's rules, axioms. And Moshe Rabbeinu was given at Sinai all the rules. All the Yud Gimel Midrash HaTeir Nidreshes Bam, the 13 methodologies. But applying that methodology requires innovation. Like today, for example, there are questions that didn't exist in Moshe Rabbeinu's time. Shabbos elevator. Issues of genetic engineering, biology, heart transplants. The big shaylas in halacha about all these things. Technology questions. Can you hear the Megillah on the radio? Can you leave the radio on Rosh Hashanah here to become mitzvah of shefer if you hear it on radio? These are questions that obviously didn't exist then. So when someone comes and a person goes through all the halachas, what do? They don't come up with a new innovation. They take principles and apply it to this situation. A Gadol Yisrael, a leader, that's what he does. He takes Torah principles without changing anything and focuses what matters to the particular individual. And in the process illuminates an idea in Torah that we may not have appreciated, like I mentioned before, the idea of a mission. Many of us don't think of it that way. We think, obviously, Hashem sends us here, we do Torah mitzvahs. But the idea that it actually is in simple terms, a psychological tool that can actually tremendously transform a person's life, can be applied universally to anyone, is a way of emphasizing and focusing on that. So a second principle I want to focus on is what's called in Hasidic terminology, it's called Aveda B'Koyach Atzmei, which simply means power of self-initiative, initiating on your own. And we all know, the big question everybody always asks themselves, why does life have to be so difficult? Why couldn't Hashem make it a little easier on us? The concept of Aveda B'Koyach Atzmei wants you to do it on your own initiative. Human nature, the Gemara says above Mitzvah. Person desires more, one kav, one measure that you earn on your own is more valuable to you than 9 that someone gives you as a gift. But we know with $9 or $9,000 you can buy more than 1,000. But you also blow it quicker. You don't own it. It's not yours. It's not integrated. The Gemara in Yerushalmi says in Arla, Nemed Chsufa. There's a thing called food, bread of shame. If someone gives you a gift, there's something shameful about it. Some of us have gotten over that shame, but it's still supposed to be a shameful thing. Why? Because there's something about self-initiating something. I earned it. And we see also in human nature, someone doesn't earn something, it has all kinds of issues involved. Besides, we take it for granted. We have insecurities around it. When you build something on your own, you're never insecure about it. When you received it from someone else, you can fake it. The bottom line, it was given to you, you didn't do it. So there's something that's self-initiative. It's a fundamental principle in Yiddishkeit. Ad kedei kach, you have the famous Rashi, the beginning of Baal Escha, we just read it a few weeks ago, Baal Escha Sanedus. Every word is b'diyuk and Torah. Why do you say Baal Escha? Baal Escha means to raise the flames. Should have said Bahad L'Keischa, to kindle the flames. The Medrash Sifri, Rashi quotes it. And the answer he gives is because the mitzvah is that the Kohen Gadol, when he lit the menorah, has to light it in a way, Ad Shetehei Shal Heves Elam Elel. We all know it takes a split second for a flame to catch. So he should wait. You could say that the Kohen Gadol would not wait and just go straight to the other flame. No, wait till you see it rising. Once it's burning, then light the other one. The Torah goes that far to change a word just to make that emphasis. Question is, this is a fundamental theme the Rebbe would speak about almost every year. Hagufa kasha. Why is it so important? Who cares? The Torah has to change it. So what? What's the worst scenario? He lights it. It burns out. He comes back and relights it. Why is it so important that Shabi shall have a selam eleh? And answers the question with another question. The Mishnah right in the beginning of Pirkei Avos, we have the Rashi Knesset Sagdela, and they said Shleisha Dvarim. What's one of them? V'himidu talmidim harbe. What's himidu? It's a not seemingly appropriate term when you're on. Say v'yilmadu talmidim harbe. I mean, there's many expressions. Himidu. What's himidu talmidim harbe? They raised. But Amida means to stand on your own feet. A child crawls, then learns to walk. The standing on your own feet is an important part of life. God forbid, if parents have Rahmanas on a child and will always hold the child will never learn to walk. To walk on your own requires I'm there to support you, but you have to learn to walk on your own feet. The Balatanya, when he was married, he married Rebbetzin, his wife was a daughter of a wealthy family relative to that, and they moved to a city and they lived in poverty. So his mother-in-law once wrote him a letter and said, if you live by us, there was no wiring money. Then either you lived by the Gevir, you didn't live by the Yeshua. You live by us, you can learn, we won't bother you, you can learn Torah, daven, whatever you want, we'll support you. Why do you have to live there on your own, without anything? And the Alter Rebbe, the Balatanya, famously answered, he said, it's a very appealing offer you're making. However, there's even a more comfortable situation. A child in its mother's womb. There it doesn't have to altogether eat. The mother eats and everything. It doesn't have to breathe, doesn't have to do anything. The problem is that the child has gotten too large and the womb has gotten too small. So it's comfortable, but it's not more significant. That was his, so to speak, response. So this idea of standing on Hamidu Talmidim Harav, the goal is don't just educate your students. Here's a lesson in education. You wouldn't think in Ba'aleischa, a lesson in education? Yeah. You can teach somebody knowledge and facts. We see this all the time. Great schools, they teach knowledge and facts. I'm sure some of you went to such yeshivas. Then there's a teacher who teaches you methodology. It's a whole different story. Knowledge and facts, you can accumulate a whole bunch of facts and know a lot. But can you solve a problem when your teacher is not there and when it's not a fact that was given to you? That's a whole other story, to teach you the tools, to teach you how to solve a problem, how to think. It says, what happened by 40 years that a student reaches a Dait Rab? Could be a brilliant student. Why does he need 40 years? 40 years it becomes his own, that he can then also integrate. Doesn't mean you need 40 years for that purpose, but it's just one example. So it's a whole different thing, Himidu. So the Mishnah is saying, don't just educate your students, make sure they stand on their feet. Make sure that when they go, wherever they go, they're empowered to be able to resolve something. That doesn't mean they don't continue to learn. No, we're always called Talmud Chacham. You never become a Chacham. A Chacham is actually considered to be, smart aleck. A Talmud Chacham, we're always a Talmud Chacham. The greatest compliment you can give someone is a Talmud, is a student of a Chacham, student of Chachma. Leishus Chachma Yiras Hashem. So Himidu Talmidim Harb. That's why the Torah made it so important, is to change the word and make it a mitzvah. No, it's not enough to light the flame. You have to make sure that your student, that your child, whoever you illuminate, you all know Meneda is a metaphor for life, that we have to be like walking Menedas, that we illuminate. The Meneda in the Beis HaMikdash, right? It says, V'chila erehu tzarech, Hashem needs light. So we know the windows in the Beis HaMikdash were shkufim atumim, they went outward, which was the opposite of how you'd usually build a building, because it's about bringing light to the outside. So we all have to be Menedas. When you're a Meneda, you can illuminate somebody by giving them information, even inspiring them. But what happens when the inspiration dissipates? What happens when the hangover is over? What happens the next day? The day after? Is it retained? Is it sustainable? They say, inspiration relatively is easy. Maintenance contracts are always more expensive. Maintenance, because to maintain it is far harder. When we go back to our own little lonely place, can we still retain that which touched us? So it's a tremendous lesson in life. You'll often see problems. If you identify this, you'll see people who are brilliant. They've got everything. Who said it? That said, there are people who know the price of everything and the value of nothing. Or people who read more and more today about less and less. I know people who know information, endless information. Someone sent me a link to a website that's uselessinformation.com. It's actually interesting stuff, but it's all useless. And there are people who know, trivia. They know everything. But there's a thing called standing on your own feet. To be able to identify and see my effort. And that, it was also a fundamental principle. The first Farbrengen, the Rebbe assumed leadership in 1951. So he began, after he said his official discourse on Bosel Lagani, he said that in America there's a custom that when you assume a position, you make a statement. And the statement he made, which became a fundamental guiding principle to his whole leadership, and I would say to everybody's life really, is a principle he said is that don't think you've appointed somebody and now he's going to take care of your problems. Everybody has to be responsible for themselves. A good teacher is someone who helps those that help themselves. And it's a big art. We all know it's very easy, for example, you see your child, you see the child growing into adult, you see them making a mistake. Most of us have the inclination and temptation not to let them make a mistake. And I'm not saying, God forbid, anyone should make a mistake, but there's something of restraint that's necessary in the maturity process. And that restraint, you see, the true greatest teachers in history, in Gemara and so on, were the ones that knew what to say. They say, Megala tefach, machaset fachayim. You know what to say, but you learn much more from your Rebbe, from your teacher, from what they didn't say, which you really appreciate much later. To tell you answers to all your problems, a person is a scholar, a person is a wise man. He can give you, your mentor can give you answers. You'll see the best mentors were the ones that told you what you needed to hear. And the rest, you said, why didn't he tell me more? Because you had to earn it on your own. And when you earn it on your own, it's a whole different thing. Then you own it. There's a beautiful word I saw recently from the Baal Shem Tov. He says, why do we say the Shemoneh Esrei, Elokeinu, Elokei Avosseinu, Elokei Avram Yitzchak Yaakov? So chronologically, it should be the other way, the order. First was Elokei Avram Yitzchak Yaakov, then Elokei Avosseinu, God of our fathers, and then Elokeinu. And his answer is very simple, but profound. This Veda B'Kei Chachmi says, in education process, we begin, obviously, chronologically. First, it was the God of Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. Then it was the God of your parents. And your parents taught you about God. But when you become an adult, you have to own it. You shouldn't be worshiping the God of your parents. You should be worshiping your God. Do you own it, or are you just doing, I'm worshiping, my parents told me, so I'm doing what they told me. It has to be internalized. It has to become yours. It's not an easy formula, because when do you exercise restraint? When do you say? When don't you say? Not suggesting it's case by case. When people come for advice, you have to know what to say, but you want to give them not just advice. You want to give them tools. And when they come back, they go back to their lives, they have tools. That's the greatest thing a great teacher can teach. And it also allows you to be in situations where you may not have someone to call upon, and you learn the answer. How do I resolve a problem? Now, obviously, Hillel said, "Ein ani li mili," so we need that. But we also, "Ein ani la'atzmi ma'ani." So I'm not suggesting that we're just self-contained, standing on our own feet. God forbid. Everything we have to always be maked and recognize the people who've given us the brachas or given us direction. But it's a combination. The Kohen Gadol was the one that lit the menorah, but he lit it in a way that the flames rise on their own. So this idea of Aveda B'Kei Chatzmei, the idea of what's called in Kabbalah and in Chassidus language you may have heard, Asrusa Dilatata. What does it mean? An awakening from below, which is Gemara in Shabbos, the famous Gemara Medor Rabel Araisa, right? What happened with Purim? That by Matan Torah, with all the greatness, there was something missing. The Jews could always come and claim, Kof Aleim Hakegigis. You compelled us. You put a mountain on top of us and threatened us. If you don't say Nasa v'Nishma, which itself is interesting. We always talk about Nasa v'Nishma like it was just our own volition. What do you mean? God he's holding a gun to our heads, essentially. A mountain on top of you if you don't say it. So the Gemara Bavarnzan says, yeah, there's possible you can still claim you really didn't do it on your own. Came Purim, Kimu v'Kibul HaYehudim, and then they did it on their own. What means on their own? Obviously with Har Kechas, but then they didn't have all these Giluyim. They didn't have the revelations. They had to be Mesiras Nefesh, they had the Gzeira and Haman, and they withstood the challenges. So Purim confirms, that's a perfect example. Matan Torah, at the end of the day, is ultimately what's called Mamayla Lamat. Came from above, Hashem gave us the Torah. There was acceptance, but Purim confirmed it, a total acceptance. So the question is asked, I'm asking the question on the Gemara, so why couldn't Purim happen right away by Matan Torah? What do you need 1,000 years later? Whatever the amount of time. Why didn't Hashem could have offered the Torah and then let them learn it on their own? Because that's a seder, my friends. That's how we grow up also. We don't begin earning on our own. We begin, our parents provide for us. Newborn children need to be taken care of. Then they get a little older. Then you start cutting the umbilical cord, metaphorically speaking. And we learn to stand on our own feet. Because we need also the years of nurturing to build confidence that when you go out there, you should be able to fly. A bird needs a nest before it starts flying. So we begin, the Eibishter protects us. Kof Aleim Har Kegigis is also explained as like an embrace of love. So we begin protected in that way. And then comes the time you matured, now will come the test. Do you want it on your own? Or is it only because it was given to you? Elikenu, or just Elikei Avosenu. And in general in history, this is also true from the beginning of time. The Gemara says in Psochim, right, that the first 26 generations, Nezunin Mechazer Shal Kodesh Baruch Hu. It was all Chesed Shal Hashem. That's why they lived in the beginning before the Mabul, almost 1,000 years. It's a gift. What happens when you get a gift and you didn't earn it? Usually you abuse it. Usually you mess it up. And that's what they did. They messed it up. They live 1,000 years. You can imagine so much time. And you take for granted. All like why? Because the beginning of history is like the beginning of the child's growth. God took care of Chesed. With the downside that you're not standing on your own, you usually make mistakes. Avram Avinu began a process of seeking. He lived already in a pagan world. He had to find God. It wasn't like in Gan Eden. He had to seek. And obviously they had to go through their challenges. So you see in history also, you all go through these on a microcosm, macrocosm. In our personal lives, you first are given, but then you have to learn to earn. Kav Shalei. The idea of really appreciating the ability to initiate. And when you initiate, there's something about giving that's more powerful than taking. You know that classic joke where it was one of these scenes, one of these stories. Guy, this highway robber, he rips off a train robber actually, and he takes everybody's jewels and money. And before he jumps off the train, he says, "Remember, everybody, it's always better to give than to take." You know, so taking may sometimes be easier, and that's what we like to do, to take. But the satisfaction, the confidence, the security that's built in a person's life through giving, through knowing that I have something to give, that I have something to initiate, the Odom Reitze B'Kav Shalei is much deeper than the Tisha Kam Shel Chaveri. So, with that, everyone should be zeichet to be able to discover what you can initiate, and both in your own homes and families and with your work, and especially to cultivate that sense in children, in our own children, in our own families, the idea that the ability to stand on your own, the ability that you have the methodology and the tools necessary to accomplish and overcome any challenge. L'chaim, l'chaim. So there's no curfew here, I hear. Is that right? Okay. So we did so far 2 out of 5. So the night is still young, right? Third is persistence. Persistence. I remember this as a little child. I lived in Crown Heights, and it was Sukkot. The year was 1966. Sukkot is very Tov Chav Zayin in the Hebrew. And that year, if your memories, anybody here that old enough? Huh? 56. So was I. Okay. I thought I was the Zaken Sheba Chabura here. Huh? Really? Okay, we're not going to ask everybody's age. It's all about the wisdom, right? Chavez? Oh, right after some chester. Okay, good. So, Sukkot Tov Chav Zayin, 66, and that Sukkot here in New York was raining the whole Sukkot. It was like a marble, one of these. I don't know if you know. Meaning Chabad is that even when it rains, they eat in a sukkah. But there's no mitzvah to have a meal when there's a rain, you know. And the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, had a custom. He had a fabringen sukkahs in the sukkah every year. As a kid, I was 10 years old. I remember the image till this day, and how it impacted me. It was this pouring rain. And in the Chabad Sukkah, you'll see that schach is very thick. So the beginning of a rain, it's actually a good mile because it doesn't come in so quick. The problem is when it continues to rain, there comes a point where it gets saturated, and then it doesn't just come down; it comes down to these globs that make your life very miserable if you're in a sukkah because unpredictable globs of water go down in this place and that place. And there was a fabring going on. The Rebbe was speaking there. And I came middle. I was a kid. I was staying in the back. I couldn't hear anything. But I remember the scene. I said to myself, this is like... And I speak now as an adult. I don't know if I said it then, but in retrospect, when I think about my reaction, it was like, what? There's no mitzvah to sit in a sukkah. I wasn't really eating a meal anyway. It was a l'chaim. So you could fabring and go inside the shul. Don't drink if you don't want to drink outside of a sukkah. Or there's a thing called in America a rain date. You know, if it rains, you do it tomorrow. Even though that sukkah is rained every day, but that's, who knows. And it was like, I could see, everybody was in the sukkah because the Rebbe was there, but they wouldn't be there if he wasn't there. Later I heard the Rebbe in his interesting sense of humor, when he said the Maimer Chassidus, he began, V'shavta mayim b'sosen, which is of course also appropriate to sukkahs, but it's, it doesn't, the humor doesn't leave us the fact that it was a Shaftem Baim Basasin, it's a Gistwasser. Anyway, but what was remained with me was not the words even. It was like this. This is the Rebbe's custom every year to sit in a sukkah, talk, speak Divrei Torah, and sing. And he's not going to change something because it's uncomfortable, or because of the rain. It was a tremendous lesson because years later, for me, I began teaching a class in Tovshin Memao in 1981. It was actually not even a class. One or two people came, wanted to get a mutual friend said, send them to me for some inspiration. At the time I was actually working, my job was, I was they call in Chabad terminology, a chayzer, a maniach, which was, I reviewed, memorized the Rebbe's Fabringens and then wrote them down. But this was one thing I was doing, so I started doing it. Oh, should I explain? Yeah. I don't know the protocol here. Okay. So a phenomenon that actually all of you should be very capable of, and that is on Shabbos and Yontif. Of course, we don't write and we don't record. So how exactly most of the Rebbe's talks were delivered on Shabbos and Yontif? So exactly how does it get documented? Well, so there was a thing called a chayzrim. Chayzrim were people who remembered hours and hours of these talks with their natural brains. And then after Shabbos, we'd gather together and write it down. And there was a second thing called manichim. Manichim means people who actually committed it to paper. So I was zeichet to be both of those, with a small group of individuals that we would actually memorize these talks, hours and hours, and then we would put it down on paper, and very often present it to the Rebbe for review and edits and ask questions and so on. It's actually become a subject, a very intriguing subject. Everyone wants to know, how do you remember like that? How could you remember hours and hours? The reason I say all of you should be capable of this, because there was almost over 1,000 years that our grandparents did this. It's called Torah Sheba'al Peh. Why is it called Torah Sheba'al Peh? Because Moshe Rabbeinu wrote down Torah Shebiksav, but most of what he taught was Ba'al Peh. They didn't write it down. They're not even allowed to write it down until Eis Lasis Lashem Eferet Teresecha, where Rabbi Yehuda Nossi and the generation realized it's being forgotten. But, so how did the Jews for 1,000 years? They memorized. They memorized thousands and thousands of volumes of ideas. And they were all chayzrim, basically. So since everybody here carries those genes, I'm sure you're all capable of this. Unfortunately, we're not challenged to do it. Today, you have a machine. But we were challenged to do it, and we did it. And it teaches you a lot about the brain. Maybe I'll share something. It's not on the agenda here, but I can share a few tips, memory tips, if you like. But I'll interweave it in some of my discussion as we go along here. But why am I saying it? Huh? I did this. I began in 1977. I did it till the Rebbe had a stroke. It was 1992. Close to 16, 17 years, 18 years. Yeah. It was very difficult, I can tell you that. But the interesting thing is, if you hang around, I'll give you an exercise that guarantees, money back guarantee, even though you're not paying for it, but that guaranteed that it can improve your memory by 20%. How do you like that? And I don't mean this as like a cute joke or something, seriously. Because it's counterintuitive. I'll share it in a few minutes, because I want to just get back to what I was saying. So the story with the sukkah. So that's what I was doing in 1980, 81. That was my job. But people asked if they wanted to meet and talk a little inspiration. I was educated. You do what you have to do to help. So I started this class. It wasn't even a class. It was an informal gathering. 2 friends would come every week. They would come and speak to me. I did it Thursday night, because by then I'd usually finished the work of preparing the last week's talk for publication. So we would meet Thursday night. Later it was changed to Wednesday night. But they started bringing their friends, and friends brought friends. And today, that class still takes place every Wednesday night. So how many years from 81? 81, remember. 81 is before the war, before many wars. Which war you want to know, right? Once upon a time it was World War II, Vietnam War. Now it's like whatever. 1981 was before fax machines, before emails, before internet. I used a typewriter. Anybody even knows what a typewriter is? You ever saw a typewriter? It's like a little box with like keys. But anyway, so in 81, what's 81 till today? Who knows math well? Huh? 32 years. Not once did I stop this class. And it was all because of that inspiration as a little kid in a sukkah, in a rainy sukkah. Because it started, it wasn't even planned, but I remember there was 1 week, I wasn't feeling so well, 1 week was raining, 1 week was snowing. Every week, till this day, I give a Wednesday night class. Tomorrow night in the city, I give it. It's broadcast actually online. And it's all because I learned that lesson of persistence. You start something good, you never stop. And it's amazing. Probably due to that, I wouldn't be probably sitting here had I not been doing that. Because it was the beginning of a lot of things, that interesting things. 40,000 people must have come to this class over these years. I remember one Wednesday night was Shavuos. And the people who were coming were secular people. They showed up, ring the bell. My wife tells them, I'm not home, but I'll be home soon. I come home from shul. A whole group of 10 people. For them, they come for Wednesday night class. They see me all dressed up. Why are you so dressed up? I said, seeing such beautiful Jews like you, well, of course you dress up. And they got a whole Masuda Shlema B'Shaite, a Shavuos meal. I didn't tell them right away. And they said, yes, so why don't you dress up every week for us? And, then such a good, beautiful meal. So then that was the class. I taught them about Shavuos. It was interesting. A new way of celebrating Shavuos. But that's what you do, And even that, I didn't tell them to them. I should have told them it's Yontiv. I remember they weren't there. But anyway, bottom line is, power of persistence, my friends, is a secret weapon. And everybody knows the story of Rabbi Akiva. Oh, my dear friend. was just talking to your son, and I wanted to say my nechama to you for your dear father. Special soul. You were there? Oh. I didn't know you came back. You can't come back. You came back. Okay. So the continuing of this discussion here will be b'schus Rab Label. The Leben Rab Mordechai and his neshama should be a schus for you, your family, and grandchildren, and a great man. Tonight? Oh, tonight's the shleishim. Okay. So we say, Mokim Menachem Esem B'Sev Shana B'Tzir Yerushalayim. Invite him over. Come. If you are a bigger Talmud Chacham, we don't have to stand up too. You know that. It's being broadcast live, I think. It's fine. It makes for good entertainment. L'chaim, l'chaim. So what was I saying? So the persistence. So everybody knows the story with Rabbi Akiva. Famous story, Rabbi Akiva. Now you all know what Rabbi Akiva is, right? Kula liba de Rabbi Akiva. Everything. The whole Gemara, it says, goes Rabbi Akiva, the greatest Talmudic scholar. Rabbi Akiva's story, we all know, was humble beginnings. Until he was 40 years old, all he didn't learn. It's shrouded in mystery. Some say it was a ger, some say it was a ben gerim. However, but for sure he was not a Talmud Chacham. That he was a brilliant man, because clearly what happened afterwards. So he meets the daughter of Kabbalah. And what happens? She inspires him. And he's walking in the forest and meditating. What should he do with his life, right? So the Medrash says he comes by, he sees a stream, sees a little waterfall, and notices a stone, the perfect hole bore right through it like a drill. He's wondering, how is that stone? Who made that a hole? And realizes that from the waterfall it drops persistently, consistently. In the negative, it's called Chinese water torture. In the positive, it bore through a perfect hole. And he said to himself, if an inanimate stone with enough water, one drop after drop, year after year, can do that, then for sure he should begin learning Torah, in Mayim ala Torah. I guess he intuited that at that point. And look what happened. Comes back 12 years later, the greatest scholar of all. And it's told us a story. Bernard Boehm, 40 years old, is not, I don't say it's not young, because even 70 is not young today, but is still young, rather. But 40 years old, he already shaped his life. That's the power of persistence. I can tell you, both in the teachings of the Rebbe and his example, persistence was the key. I sometimes brought me to tears when I saw the Rebbe speaking to people. Who's he talking to? I thought, are they hearing him? But he never gave up. He would say it again and again. The patience that's required, to be persistent like that, not a simple matter. And but ultimately it pierces. And I think each of us have to take the lesson. You start something good, never stop. It's very easy to stop. One thing, the excuse here, 1 week this, tomorrow that. Persistence. That was what I learned as a little kid in that sukkah that was raining. 1967. I don't know if you remember the sukkahs of Tavshin Kozayim. That rainy sukkahs. It's unbelievable. That's a lesson. Listen, I didn't even hear the words what he said. I just saw this sight. And I started to realize, something? When you do something that's right, we have plenty of problems in our lives. So the good things at least should be permanent. And again, it's maybe a simple lesson, but I think it's a lesson, that's a tremendous lesson in how our own perseverance and our ability to see things through. There's a famous mashal from the Baal Shem Tov. It's called in Yiddish, a spiral staircase is called Schwindeltrepp. You know the expression Schwindeltrepp? Schwindeltrepp means swindling steps. A swindler is a swindler. Why is it called Schwindeltrepp? Because the steps are swindling steps. They're not just they're spiral, they also swindle us into thinking you're not climbing. When you go up a regular staircase, you see the destination. You go up a swindling staircase, a spiral, Every time you've got to make a whole turn. So by the time you come to the top, you can convince yourself that you didn't make any progress because your face back is facing the destination. You don't even see it. So he uses the example that sometimes the greatest breakthroughs you don't see. And you think you give up, You did everything, and that last step you don't make because you think you don't see it. You think, hey, Moshe Rabbeinu, one of the greatest virtues of Moshe Rabbeinu, persistence. Veschanan el Hashem. What's the gematria of Veschanan? 515. He's 515 tefillahs. Can you imagine? 515 tefillahs. Moshe is praying to Hashem, let me go into Eretz Yisrael. Till Hashem has to tell him no more. So what is he? You're not going to let him in. Why do you have to let him torture himself 515? You should have told him the first prayer. Why are you praying? First of all, it wouldn't have helped probably. Moshe would have continued anyway. As we know, he was a pretty persistent guy. But also to teach us. There's something. And everyone has the question, 515 tefillahs of a tzaddik were wasted? God forbid. They say, I think the Rabbi Jacobson and some others write, that every prayer helps us today deal with Eretz Yisrael, because he opened up he broke through another barrier. So he didn't end up going into Eretz Yisrael, but he ended up affecting Eretz Yisrael. Like it says about why when Hashem at the end of this says, go up on the mountain and look at Eretz Yisrael. So everyone says, what do you mean look? What Moshe's interested in a sightseeing tour of Eretz Yisrael? He wanted to go in, to be Mekayim mitzvahs there. He's not going to look. So it says, because the gaze of a tzaddik affects what he sees, even according to halacha, and it helped them kavish Eretz Yisrael, helped pave the way that it would be easier for them to conquer it. So every prayer, but 515 prayers, persistence. Talk about persistence. Why is Yom Kippur the holiest day in the year? You're all Talmid Chacham. Anybody knows why? Is it just a Chak? It could have been Rosh Hashanah. It could have been Sukkot, Purim. The reason is very simple. Because what happened Yom Kippur? It's Achaz B'Shana, that's a posuk. That's a Gzeres HaKosov. But something happened also. The second Luchas. What happened? The Eden built a golden calf after receiving the Torah. As I mentioned before, when you don't get it from the below, you can make mistakes. They built a golden calf, Egel Hazov. What happens? Hashem wants to destroy them all. Tells Moshe, go build yourself another nation. They messed up. And they didn't. They messed up seriously. The cardinal sin, Avodah Zarah Mamash. Only 439 days after they heard, they messed up. And Moshe was up on the mountain. It wasn't his fault. He wasn't there. So Hashem said, go build another nation. What does Moshe do? He breaks the luchas, first of all. Everyone thinks that he broke the luchas. Most people think he got angry. He lost himself, lost control. First of all, Moshe was not a loser of control. It was very deliberate. And second of all, breaking luchas, we all know when you throw down a Sefer Torah falls by accident in a shul, Rahman al-Islam, it's considered a very sad day. There's all kinds of takonas and all kinds of things that you have to do by accident. And that's a Sefer Torah. Here you're taking luchas, that's far holier than a Sefer Torah. The Eibishter himself engraved it, he himself wrote it, he himself shaped it. And he goes deliberately to throw it down. Is that conceivable? So Rashi answers from Medrash. Moshe was a very wise advocate. He was a smart. The Jews had heard Lo Yila Kol Elokim Acheinu, but they didn't receive the Ksubah yet. Yem Chasanos Zemat, they didn't receive the Ksubah. So he tore the Ksubah. That way he could always come back and say to the Eibishter, listen, they heard it, but they didn't sign it, they didn't take the contract yet. So it was an act of unbelievable Mesiras Nefesh and Avos Yisrael, because it means to take a Sefer Torah, take luchas and to shatter them. And that's why Shivrei HaLuchas remain in the Aron. Why do we need a reminder that Moshe broke the luchas? Because in many ways, the broken luchas demonstrate Moshe's persistence. And we all know what happened on the mountain. He goes back up after Shavasar B'Tam, after he breaks the luchas Shavasar B'Tam for another 40 days and begs God, forgive them. Hashem says no. That was the days with Yom and Bekat, right? Then he goes another 40 days. Through our whole El, Rosh Hashanah, he's up on the mountain, till Yom Kippur. And finally Hashem says, which we announce right after Kol Nidrei, Shalachti Kidvarecha. It's probably the single greatest act of a human being in history. Because he's spending with God. And God says, no, I won't forgive him. Moshe says, yes. What were they arguing about for 80 days? Clearly it wasn't easy, because Hashem was not giving in. And Moshe would not take no for an answer. Imagine, with Hashem. Because he knew that the depth of Hashem's connection with Eden was so deep that there's no way. He wouldn't, if it would have been 800 days, he wouldn't know left. That was Moshe Rabbeinu. That's why he's a Moshe Rabbeinu. And Yom Kippur basically is the birth of hope. We all make mistakes. That's not a chiddush. The chiddush is, can we repair after a mistake? And Moshe was saying to Hashem, listen, they made a mistake. It may have been deliberate, been mazed. They deserve what they deserve. But I can't go back to the human race and to the Jewish people and tell them, you can't make mistakes. They're going to make mistakes. I need you to tell me there's hope. That if a mistake is done, if we push and we knock on the door, we can break open. There's an unbelievable Reishis Chochmah. You all know the story with Acher, right? Acher. Acher is the only person we dismissively call him Acher, the other. Elisha ben Avuya. The 4 people went into the Pardes, the Gemara says. They went into to the orchard. They went into spiritual experience. This one went mad. This one died. Acher became an apostate, and Rabbi Akiva was the only one. Interesting, Rabbi Akiva, because he earned his way. Nichnas b'shalom v'yas b'shalom. But Acher is maybe the most intriguing character. What happened? What did he see there? There's long discussions about that. But what's the story with Acher? So Acher, we all know what happens, because he's Yedeus Rebbeinu Mechaven Nimrod Bey. He knew. He didn't lose his faith because he was ignorant. He knew he lost his faith for some reason. He saw something very profound that disturbed him. The Gemara talks about the story with Shiluach HaKan, that he saw that the child, the father telling his child to go up in a tree to take down, send away the mother. So both mitzvahs, Leman Yaricha Yamecha. The son falls and dies. Not one. Kabbalah Savich is supposed to bring Arichas Yamim and Shiluach HaKan. And here both of them. So this was part of the contribution. Acher was such a challenge that it says in Gemara, what does it say when he passed away? Even Gehenim didn't want him. Can you imagine? So his neshama hovered in Tsar till Rabbi Yehuda had to daven for him to let Gehenim accept him. So the Reishis Chachma says a very powerful thing. He says that when Acher came up Lamaila, the Eibusha said to him, why didn't you do tshuva? You could have, you knew you could do it. Everything, tshuva. So Acher said, because I heard the Baskel from the Shemayim that said, everyone can do tshuva, chutz ma'acher. So they say, that's what he writes. I'm not sure where his source is, but he says, but you know the din, there's a din. Kol ma shabal abayis emelecha say, chutz mitzay. When your host invites you to his home. So you're supposed to listen to him. You're in his house. He tells you, sit here, you're supposed to sit here, do this, do that. Except one thing. If he tells you to leave, that he has no right to do. He invited you, he can't tell you to leave. So the same thing as the balabais of the world. Kol masha balabais emelecha, do except say. So just because you heard Lamaila, the Baskel that says that everyone can do tshuva, chutz ma'acher, you shouldn't knock down the door. Because even the balabais of the world can't tell you to leave. So the Reishis Chachma writes. Unbelievable word. What's the point? The point is there's a thing called persistence. And Moshe Rabbeinu proved it. Imagine Moshe Rabbeinu, God forbid, had not prevailed, or he had not insisted. We would never have this lesson. We'd never have the lesson that anything is possible. Yom Kippur tells us everything is possible, and it takes persistence. And we all know that sometimes, in our own lives, we can be challenged in relationships, in marriage, in other ways. When you love someone, it's unconditional. Unconditional means you're ready to do whatever it takes. And that persistence has power. This is a lesson that I personally, as I said, took to my heart. I saw it in the Rebbe's behavior and how he taught. And it's, I think, a lesson we all can tremendously learn from. So we've gone through 3 things so far. We did the mission, Aveda B'Kei Chatzmi, self-initiative, and persistence. There's 2 more to go. That doesn't mean we still have a long night. Right? And I still have to share with you, as I promised, some secrets of memory. So we got a whole agenda going. And so l'chaim, everyone, l'chaim, l'chaim. So I come away with the conclusion people are uncomfortable because they don't really believe it's going to happen. So why do we talk about things we don't believe? Something like that. You know what? It's something. Right. It's for a distant future. I told the guy who was a real, I would say, menagid to this Mashiach. He says to me, he's always telling me. So I said to him, let me ask you something. Let's turn the clock forward. Today is the last day of Shit Alpha Shnir. 6,000 years are coming to an end. It's only 200 years from now, right? It's the last day. And someone says, you know what, 6,000 years, Mashiach has to, there's no other way. It's either this year or it has to happen. And someone says, okay, so how is it going to happen? Someone says, there's a guy living somewhere. He may be Mashiach. What were you going to say to this? I say, I'll tell you what you're going to say. You don't believe it. So now it's easy to say 200 years from now. But in 200 years, you'll still have the same problem. What's the difference? The problem that you have today is the problem you'll have then. You can't identify somebody. But it's going to be somebody one day. So why, if it's controversial, it's going to be controversial. Of course it's going to be controversial. Because it hasn't happened ever before. Tchitz HaMeis is also going to be controversial. It hasn't happened. But either you believe, I have no problem, by the way, if someone says, I don't believe. I have a problem with someone claims I believe, but he masks it into all kinds of no, this. I have no problem. Someone denies it, fine. They never saw someone rise from the dead. So they have a problem with Mechayim Mesim. I understand that. I have a voice in me also that's somewhat skeptical. But there's another voice that says, it says so in the Torah, it was promised. And the same God, the Gemara says, Mai deloy hava hava, Mai da hava hava. Today you see that they're almost able to revive DNA. So you can even be malbushed in scientific knowledge, frankly. It's a big thing. You're reviving something that never disappeared. The DNA is there. I'm not trying to minimize the miracle of it. But listen, I'm a big believer in, you have to be honest in your conversation. I talk to scientists, for example, and I always ask scientists that I know, I said, non-believing scientists, I say, do you have any vested interest in no God? They always say, no, I have no vested. I said, yes, you do have. Same one I have. You don't have to be accountable. So why don't you be full disclosure? Say, before I talk about whether I believe in God or not, I want to say I have interests here. That's what every honest person does. Full disclosure. I can tell you, I grew up in a frum home. So I can say subjective. I'm invested in supporting Yiddishkeit because I grew up with it. Not because necessarily I'm this most objective guy. There's nothing wrong with stating you have subjective interest, and then let's have an intelligent conversation. So I said, a religious person I could understand. You dismiss. How could they're dogmatic. But how could you, a scientist, be dogmatic? Why don't you say, I have personal interest in no God, and that maybe affects some of my conclusions. No scientist will ever say that because they want to claim they're objective. Now, I'm not taking away their arguments, but I think you have to be call a spade a spade. Let's put it this way. L'chaim.